Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the PG Show, where we talk about all things college football. And today we have to talk about week 1 college football. We have to talk about the games that I like, the games that I don't like. Is the SEC in trouble? And then, of course, we got to talk a little bit recruiting. But before we do that, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know what you guys are thinking down in the comments below. What game and what matchup are you most excited to see this week for week 1? He's got 2 other guys on his team that could potentially challenge for his Heisman back-to-back, and that is going to be Will Anderson, who we'll get to here in a second, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who I actually don't have in my top 5, but if I had to make a top 10, I think Jahmyr Gibbs would definitely be in there. And so going into Will Anderson, this guy probably had one of the best defensive seasons that we've seen in a while, as in 2021, he led the FBS in 101 total tackles, led the nation in tackles for loss with 34.5 and sacks at 17.5. And I'm sorry, he didn't lead the nation with 101 total tackles. It was just tackles for loss and sacks. But I think it's also going to be hard for Will Anderson to win the award as well, because not only does he have to have a better season than what he had last year as a defensive player, but he's got to do the same thing as Bryce Young, as he's potentially got to beat out 2 other players on his team. Additionally, a defensive player has not won the Heisman since 1997 with Charles Woodson. Now, people have went and have made the finalists, but they have been far off from winning the actual Heisman Trophy. And so I think there's got to be a lot of luck for Will Anderson here. But I kind of want to dive into a little bit deeper of an issue with Will Anderson than just not being able to win the Heisman. And he has been one of the most prolific defensive players that we've seen in a while, and a perfect example of somebody who technically doesn't need to come back for another season and could go to the NFL draft. This is a guy that is ready to go play at the highest level. And so for him to come back, he needs to win a championship and to basically stack those awards up and potentially add one like a Heisman to really make coming back, I think, something that really benefits him. Coming back and then not winning the awards, not winning the Heisman, I think could potentially be a hiccup for him in terms of going to the NFL, because then he just puts another year on his body outside of playing at the highest level. Thirdly on this list, I have CJ Stroud. Now, a lot of people have CJ Stroud on this list. In 2021, he completed 71% of his passes, which in my opinion, I think when you hit over the 70% mark as a quarterback, regardless of the talent that you're playing, that's an incredible mark to go hit. And he threw for a little over 4,400 yards, 44 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. So really, his stats weren't too far off from Bryce Young, outside of how many yards he threw for. In fact, he had a better completion percentage than Bryce Young did and threw 1 less interception. Now, Bryce Young did play in the national championship game, so he played 1 more game than CJ Stroud did. And CJ Stroud has a really good shot at it this year, because with the talent that Ohio State's going to have this year, you expect CJ to have a stellar year, regardless whether he wins the Heisman or not, because Ohio State is going to have talent in that wide receiver room, such as Jackson Smith-Njigba, who completely balled out in the Rose Bowl, Julian Fleming, and Emeka Egbuka, who was an extremely highly recruited wide receiver out of high school, somebody that actually the Oklahoma Sooners, my team, wanted a lot. And so speaking of OU, we have to talk about Dillon Gabriel being in this list. And I know a lot of you are going to go, well, Preston, you're an OU fan. Of course you're going to have OU or an OU player in your top 5. But that's actually not why. And the reason I have him in here is because he played at a school like UCF, and the weapons that he had at UCF are not the weapons he's going to have at OU, meaning he will have a much better season than he has ever had, potentially a career year, because he is going to be throwing to high 4-star and 5-star talent on either it's in the slot or on the outside. So in his career, he has completed 60.7% of his passes, where in 2021, before he got hurt, was having a career best at 68.7%, which is still higher than where Bryce Young was at last year. He has thrown for about a little over 8,000 yards, 70 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Now, that 14 interception number and maybe the touchdowns look a little low, but it is important to remember that he did only play 3 games in 2021. So we definitely expect Dillon Gabriel to have a big bounce back year, especially with the weapons that he's going to have in Marvin Mims, Theo Weiss, Drake Stoops, Farouk, and even Jaden Gibson. Not to mention, he is going to have a tremendous offensive line in front of him. And it's important to note that in previous years, he has been sacked in his career a total of 50 times. In 2020 and in 2019 and 2020, he was sacked 22 times each year. Last year in 3 games was sacked 8 times. So definitely giving him some better coverage will be able to provide a little bit more comfortability to sit in the pocket and make plays. Additionally, on this list for number 5, and to come up with the top 5, in my opinion, is pretty hard because there are so many great quarterbacks. However, I didn't want to include more than 3 quarterbacks on this list. And I kind of went back and forth on who's my number 5. Is it Jahmyr Gibbs? Is it Bijan Robinson? But I had to go with Deuce Vaughn out of Kansas State. And you might be shocked, falling out of your chair right now, because this is an interesting, and it's not a hot take. In 2021, he had 234 carries for 1,404 yards and 18 touchdowns. Additionally, he caught 49 receptions for 468 yards and 4 touchdowns, with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. And remember, Skylar Thompson necessarily wasn't known for his arms, but more for his legs. And so I think with Deuce Vaughn coming back after having a great season last season, we should expect to see a stellar year from Deuce Vaughn, especially behind an experienced offensive line and a K-State team who is coming in with expectations to potentially compete for a Big 12 championship title. Now, I actually have K-State as a dark horse to make the college football playoffs. And before you guys jump on me for that, that is because Ohio State just lost their defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles, but they also lost significant talent on the defensive side of the ball. Really, I think the only 2 teams in the league that are going to get in Kansas State's way is Oklahoma and Baylor. Now, that's not to say that Kansas State does have a bad season because, well, K-State could easily just go win 6 or 7 games. But I have a lot of expectations for this K-State team to at least win 8 or 9 games, but potentially compete in the Big 12 as a 1-loss team to go to the college football playoffs. And I think Deuce Vaughn, who out of high school was a 3-star prospect, is going to become a household name at the running back position and could be a huge component to this Kansas State offense and what they're going to be able to do this season. So jumping into some of the dark horses at Heisman that I have, I am going to start with, of course, Bijan Robinson. Now, last year, I would have had Bijan Robinson in my top 5. But this year, I don't. And there's a very specific reason why. And that is because that O-line that they have is horrible. And I think to be a good running back, you have to have a good O-line in front of you. Now, that's not to say that Bijan Robinson doesn't shock us all and can overcome the offensive line problems and the blocking problems. But I just don't see it. I see Bijan having a very good year. I see this Texas offense succeeding tremendously. But that offensive line is a huge concern, especially at some of the depth problems they're going to have. And being able to put freshmen on the offensive line and having to go play teams like Oklahoma or Baylor, who are going to have experienced defensive lines, that's going to be a problem for them. And ultimately, I think that's going to hurt Bijan Robinson in the Heisman chances. Additionally, I have Spencer Rattler on this list. And last year, you would have assumed Heisman favorite. But he didn't have a great season last year. I do want to point out, for anybody that does not like Spencer Rattler, Spencer Rattler is now in South Carolina, back reunited with Shane Beamer, who previously in 2020 was the offensive coordinator at OU, and 2020 was Spencer Rattler's best year. Additionally, he is going to have one of his favorite targets in Austin Stogner there as well. And so I would expect not only for South Carolina to have a tremendous season, maybe winning 8 or 9 games but also for Spencer Rattler to be one of the best quarterbacks and actually one of the top draft picks this year. Now, does that mean that he will have a better season than the 3 that I mentioned in CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, and Dillon Gabriel? I don't know, but I definitely have to include him as a dark horse. Additionally, somebody else that I want to look at is maybe somebody that a lot of people are overlooking and forgetting, and that is Mohammed Ibrahim. And I'm sorry if I said his name wrong. But coming back from an injury last year, we actually expected him last year to be a Heisman contention finalist. We expected this guy to go out there and have a huge season for Minnesota and lead that offense to the promised land. However, an injury derailed his season, and as he comes back and as Minnesota looks to have a bounce back year, Mohammed is going to be a huge component to that offense. He's going to be a huge component to what Minnesota is able to do offensively. And because of that, and being the primary weapon on that offense, I definitely expect him to be a dark horse. Now, the next one on my list, a lot of people are going to potentially come back and gripe at me and maybe kind of get onto me for this one. But I actually think this one's highly possible, and that is DJ Uiagalelei. So after last year, he did not live up to the expectations that we all had for him. I expect him to have a rebound year this year. He was a highly recruited quarterback out of high school and led and helped in that season where Clemson won the national championship. I think this year he is going to help lead Clemson to another undefeated regular season, and he is going to reassert himself as that player, that dude that we all expected him to be coming out of high school. Lastly on this list, I have, of course, Caleb Williams. Now, you might be asking, why is he not in the top 5? And why is he in the dark horse? So I actually really considered putting Caleb above Dillon Gabriel, but I had a hard time doing it. And here is the reason why. He is a Lincoln Riley quarterback, and Lincoln Riley quarterbacks always will get the respect to potentially win the Heisman because of what Lincoln Riley has been able to do with Baker, Kyler, Jalen Hurts, and then Caleb Williams last year. The only problem I have is if USC does not have a great record this season, they maybe only win 8 or 9 games, that is going to potentially hurt Caleb Williams in his Heisman candidacy. So because of that reason, I have to put him as a dark horse because I really don't know what to expect from USC in that offensive line and if they will be able to go and beat a Utah or an Oregon or a Notre Dame or even a UCLA. I think this is going to be a rebuilding year for USC, and even though they're going to have a significant improvement, maybe even win 8 games, I think their floor is potentially to lose 4 or 5 games. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's jump into it. All right, let's move on to, is the SEC in trouble in week 1? And this one I thought was going to be a really interesting topic. So the SEC is slated for a lot of big games with matchups from the Pac-12, the ACC, and Cincinnati. So let's dive into the games and why the SEC should be concerned going into week 1. And we're going to start off with the game that everybody's going to be watching at 3:30, Oregon at Georgia. Now, technically, this game is not being played at Georgia, but it is being played in Atlanta, which you can pretty much say is home field advantage for Georgia, as Oregon's having to travel across the country. Now, Georgia is fresh off of a national championship with a lot of change coming to the team, losing 15 players to the NFL draft and their defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning, to the Oregon Ducks. Georgia is favored by 17 in this game, but there are some real concerns around if Georgia is going to be able to be super competitive in this game from my side. So let's kind of dive into some of those concerns. So since you are coaching against the guy who used to operate your defense, I think that is potentially going to cause problems because he's going to know those schemes and he's going to know how to exploit some of those schemes and use it against Georgia. Additionally, you lost one of your top wide receivers in Jermaine Burton to Alabama in the transfer portal. You also lost wide receiver George Pickens in the NFL draft. You lost 2 running backs. You lost 2 offensive linemen, and personally, I don't think Stetson Bennett is the best quarterback anyways on that team. Yes, he did lead Georgia to the promised land last year, but I still think maybe JT Daniels was the better quarterback on the team and maybe had the most upside. We can discuss that one at a later date. You guys can roast me in the comments for that one below. That's just my personal opinion. So, in reality, I don't think he has the protection or the weapons that he did last year, and I just don't think this offense is going to be able to go light people up, and I think it's going to struggle if teams are able to shut down their running game. Additionally, you lost 5 starters on your defense, along with 2 of your best defensive tackles. Now, I know that there is another defensive tackle on this team that a lot of people are not talking about, and you guys will see who I am talking about week 1, but you're still integrating a lot of different guys into this defense, and they're playing roles necessarily that they weren't playing last year. And you are starting out against a team like Oregon, who traditionally puts out good running backs, good receivers, and over the past 10 years has had pretty decent quarterbacks, especially in Marcus Mariota and Justin Herbert, who now actually plays for the Los Angeles Chargers. So, although Oregon lost their starting quarterback from last year, wide receiver and running back, they did get Bo Nix in the transfer portal, and they have Ty Thompson in that quarterback room as well. You are also returning your second best wide receiver in Chris Hudson and bringing back a high 4-star wide receiver in Kyler Casper, who can come in and make a difference. Additionally, you went to transfer portal, you grabbed several running backs. I think they're going to be fine at that position. One thing that I think is important for Oregon is they have an experienced offensive line, and they have one of the top-ranked offensive tackles in Josh Connerly Jr. from the 2022 cycle. This is somebody that everybody wanted. USC, Oklahoma, Alabama, Michigan, everybody wanted this guy, and Oregon was able to go in there and get him over them. I think it's a little bit of that Phil Knight money, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Also, the defense is returning some starters, and you are bringing in great talent from the 2022 cycle in Devon Jackson and Jaleel Tucker and taking in several guys from the transfer portal. The question is here, will Georgia have a national championship hangover? And with all they lost, can they hold back Oregon's offense that should be explosive and exploit some of those schemes that Georgia will be throwing at them? My deal is, Georgia kind of has to slip up a little bit. Georgia's going to have a turnover or 2. Oregon went into Ohio State last year and beat them on the road. It's not too far-fetched to think Oregon can do that again. And that's why Oregon has a chance to potentially upset the defending national champions in the Georgia Bulldogs. Next up on this list, we have Cincinnati and Arkansas. Now, this one we don't have to get as in-depth as we did with Oregon and Georgia because, quite frankly, I think Arkansas is probably going to win this game by 21. But this one's interesting because Cincinnati lost so much in the past year to the NFL, and Arkansas just got better at a lot of skill positions through the portal, and they are also returning KJ Jefferson. Cincinnati lost players like Sauce Gardner, Alec Pierce, Brian Cook, Desmond Ridder. I think it's Majai Sanders and Kobe Bryant. That's a lot to have to replace as a group of 5 team, and I definitely think this is going to end up being a rebuilding year. Now, what's interesting is the line for this game is only -6.5 to Arkansas at home. I personally think that line is a little low, but we will see on Saturday as Cincinnati goes to Arkansas. One thing Arkansas needs to do is, as they are built like Alabama, is do what Alabama did to Cincinnati last year in the playoffs, which is expose them in the running game. you can run up and down that defense, do it like Alabama did, and you shouldn't have a problem. You should win this game by 21. Next up, and lastly on this list, we have Utah and Florida. Well, Utah at Florida. So out of all the SEC matchups this week, I think this is the biggest one of concern for an SEC team and probably the most likely to be an upset. And I say an upset because Florida has won 32 consecutive home openers. That's a 32-year streak, guys. That is a long streak. So right now, Utah is projected by many to not only win the Pac-12, but potentially make the playoffs. So beating Florida would be a tremendous effort towards that step. Now, they did lose to Ohio State last year in the Rose Bowl, who a lot thought could have been the national champion last year. Specifically talking about Ohio State, not Utah. And if they didn't, and if, Ohio State didn't lose to Oregon early in the season. Now, Utah's returning a lot, including Cam Rising at quarterback, who potentially could be a Heisman contender by the end of the season, and definitely beating Florida in the Swamp would be a great start to that Heisman campaign. Florida has to watch out because Utah is going to set the tone early with being physical and running the ball up the middle. Additionally, Anthony Richardson is going to see a lot of looks from that Utah defense. And I think one of the only things Florida really has going for them in this game is the heat that Utah will have to play in, as the humidity is something that Utah is not going to be used to. And that humidity in Florida is just something different. I actually believe Florida will lose this game. That 32-game win streak is coming to an end, and that will be an upset. Now, why is this big, and why do I think that the SEC is in trouble by potentially losing those 3 games? Because the Big Ten has just made huge moves with their new media package. Their recruiting is about to skyrocket over the next couple of years. I think it's going to hurt the SEC if they lose all 3 of these games or only go 1 of 2 in week 1 to the other conferences. And the reason is because in week 2, it doesn't get any better, right? Alabama is going to stomp a mud hole in Texas, but there's a good chance Vanderbilt's going to lose to Wake Forest, and there's a good chance that K-State is going to beat Missouri. Texas A&M could slip up to Appalachian State. That's a trap game, but they're definitely going to slip up to Miami in week 3. Pittsburgh, definitely probably going to go in there and beat Tennessee. You have the SEC starting to beat up on each other, with South Carolina playing Arkansas, Florida playing Kentucky. This is not going to be an easy season for the SEC to start. Additionally, in one matchup we didn't talk about for week 1 is LSU and Florida State. I don't think I really need to talk about that one. LSU should be able to go in there and win that game. If they go in, lose it, and the SEC goes 1-3, got some serious problems there. I do credit the SEC, though, for trying to schedule great out-of-conference opponents. That's not necessarily something that we see a whole lot, but I do see it concerning, especially if Arkansas maybe loses to Cincinnati. Okay, let's go ahead and let's jump into the games that I am most excited to watch going into week 1 football, and the first being Oklahoma State and Central Michigan. If those of you who don't remember, in 2016, Central Michigan got the best of Oklahoma State in that game in the last minute. Right now, Oklahoma State, I believe, is favored by 21.5. I am going to take the over on that one. I think the Oklahoma State offense is going to put it together. I don't think Central Michigan is very good. And quite honestly, I am really excited to watch that game on Thursday night at 6 p.m. as I also get ready to watch some church on a Thursday night as well. It's going to be a great Thursday night with football coming back. Additionally, we also have that West Virginia at Pitt game, but they're projecting about 75% of that stadium to be West Virginia fans. So it's more of a home game for West Virginia, even though they're having to travel, but the backyard bash is back, and I am excited to see what this West Virginia team is going to look like with JT Daniels at the helm. There is a lot to love about this West Virginia team, but also a lot to love about the Pittsburgh team with Keaton Slovis taking over as the quarterback, with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison leaving Pitt, along with Mark Whipple, their offensive coordinator, going to Nebraska to try to help the Cornhuskers turn around that team in the Big Ten. Right now, we have Pitt favored by -7.5, but I am actually going to go against the spread and take West Virginia to win the game and cover at +7.5. I think this will be a tremendous win in a tremendous way for West Virginia to start that season, as that defense is going to be suffocating, and they gave Oklahoma a run for their money last year in Norman. Another game that I'm excited to watch on Thursday is Penn State at Purdue, because Penn State did not have a great season last year. And I think there's a lot to like behind a early Big Ten matchup and getting a chance to see what are the Nittany Lions going to be in the 2022-2023 season. Are they going to be a team that is able to compete with the best teams in the Big Ten and potentially cause a shakeup? I don't know. But I know that this team is going to come out. They're going to compete this year. They're going to be bowl eligible. They might even win 8 or 9 games, maybe beat Ohio State. We will see. Right now, that spread is -3.5, and I will take Penn State to win that game by at least 14 points. So I will take Penn State on the over there. Next up on this list, I am excited to watch Kansas versus Tennessee Tech. And the reason why I'm excited to watch Kansas is because Lance Leipold has this program going in the right direction. And I really want to see what Kansas is going to put together, as last season, towards the end of the season, they started to look like a pretty competitive team in the Big 12, beating Texas in Austin, and then losing to West Virginia and TCU by a combined 10 points. They also played Oklahoma pretty tough in Lawrence last year. Now, I will save my reservations for that game and what I think actually happened there, but I'm going to take Kansas to win this game easily. I do not see a line here, so I am not going to predict that. And for those of you who are wondering, I'm actually just looking on ESPN at those lines. You guys will see those right here on the screen as well. And another game that I am super excited to watch, we talked about it in my SEC over-under, but it is Oregon and Georgia, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you my prediction now for this. I think Oregon and Bo Nix are going to easily squeeze out a win against Georgia. They did it last year. I think they can do it again. I think the line is way too high in Georgia's favor at -17, so I will take, at the minimum, Oregon to at least cover this game, but I do think Oregon will win. All right, another game that I am super excited to watch this year is the Oklahoma game starter of the season, Oklahoma versus Utep, and this is going to be a great one because Oklahoma now has a new head coach in Brent Venables, but also has over 40 new players on this team, a lot of them from the transfer portal, and then from a great stellar 2022 class. And I say great and stellar because Brent Venables had to come in late with Bob Stoops to try and save the recruiting class for Oklahoma. And because of that, I am super excited to see Oklahoma go out there and see what the future looks like for them with Brent Venables at the helm. Additionally, they have a lot of players that I'm really excited for. I think the line on this one was 34.5. I'm actually going to take the over on that one. I think OU is going to win 55-0 in this game. They might even win a little higher. UTEP might get a field goal here and there, but my prediction is going to be 55-0. I think the FPI rankings give them a 98.6% chance in this game. And quite frankly, I don't think the UTEP Miners are going to provide too much of a problem for the Oklahoma Sooners. The first drive or two could be a little problemsome just with them getting in the swing of things in a real live game. But ultimately, I think the OU offense will get into a swing of things later in the game. Additionally, another game that I really like, and we talked about it in the SEC portion of this video, and it is the Arkansas versus Cincinnati game. I think Arkansas is going to win that game by 21. You don't need any more of analysis there. Another game I'm really excited to watch, the UTSA versus Houston game, and here's why. This is a big group of 5 game because Houston is ranked number 24, and this is a Houston team that a lot of people expect to go out there and potentially be that group of 5 team that is considered for a playoff spot this year. Right now, the FPI ranking has them at a 62.4% chance to win, but the line is only at -4. And remember, this was a UTSA team that was undefeated up until I think week 10 or week 11 last year. So this is a UTSA team that was pretty good last year. They play to their talent. I think that they're going to be very good again this year. Definitely not. I don't think they're going to be going undefeated that late into the season, but I think UTSA could cause problems for Houston and potentially win this game. So that's a matchup everybody needs to watch. I do predict, however, Houston will win this game, but it might be only by 3. I don't know if they're going to cover that -4 line. All right, another game that I am really excited to watch is this USC versus Rice game, and it's because I want to see what Lincoln Riley does with this offense out there at USC. Additionally, I want to see what that defense looks like, right? They did get a 5-star cornerback in Domani Jackson. They got quite a bit out of the transfer portal. They got Jordan Addison on offense. They got Caleb Williams. We know about all of that. But Rice is a team that in the past has caused problems for a lot of team. And, maybe USC gets off to a hot start, but starts to sleep later in that game. The line is actually set at -32.5. I actually am going to pick Rice to cover on that game, but the Trojans to win. All right, another game that I am really excited to watch is the Alabama versus Utah State game. And here is why. Because right now they do have Bryce Young as a returning starter in this game. But I want to know who's going to be QB2, and I want to know which quarterback in that quarterback room looks the best outside of Bryce Young. Because if Bryce Young goes down, this all of a sudden is a very interesting topic for the Alabama Crimson Tide, and who is going to step up in that quarterback room for them. And of course, we got to talk about the game day game of the week, Ohio State versus Notre Dame. And right now, Ohio State is favored by 17 to win this game with an 83.5% chance to win, according to FPI. And I'm actually going to go with the upset here. I'm going to go with Notre Dame by 3. Marcus Freeman and that defense, they are ready. They are motivated to go out there and stop the Ohio State Buckeyes. Additionally, I think we're going to see a Notre Dame offense that we haven't seen in a long time, one that is able to move the ball down the field at will. And also, I don't think the Jim Knowles defense is necessarily going to have it all together game 1 at an elite level for an elite team like Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman gets his first big win as a head coach in this game. I'm taking Notre Dame with the upset on game day. They will potentially move up to number 3. This is huge. Actually, they might even move up to number 2 if Georgia loses. All right. Next up, we got the Texas Longhorns and the University of Louisiana Monroe Warhawks. Texas should win this game. I'm picking them to win it. However, I am not picking them to cover because at -37.5, that is a big line. And I think University of Louisiana Monroe is going to help us show just how bad that Texas Longhorns offensive line really is. I think Texas will struggle at the beginning of the game, but towards the third and fourth quarter, they will put it together. I do think you will see a little bit of Hudson Card in this game behind Quinn Ewers. I think Sark wants to make a point that Hudson Card is their best quarterback right now outside of Malik Murphy. But with the boosters really trying to push Quinn Ewers, Sark has to make a statement. I think you see Quinn Ewers sit probably by the second half. Hudson Card comes in, finishes the game. I'm taking the University of Louisiana Monroe to cover, but Texas to go ahead and win. All right. Next up on this list, I've got LSU and Florida State. And Florida State did not necessarily impress me last week, but they did win the game. They did show us they have 3 running backs that can produce, but I'm wanting to see what they can do against another Power 5 team. I don't necessarily need Florida State to win this game for me to become a believer, but I do need them to make it close. Right now, the line is set at -3, and I think that is really low. I think LSU wins this game by 10 or 14 points, but I think Florida State looks a lot better. I think this is a lot of momentum on the recruiting trail for Florida State, but LSU gets to win, and they cover in this game. Well, last and not least, we have Clemson and Georgia Tech. I am really excited for this game. I think that Clemson is going to show out. I think Clemson is going to show us again that they can potentially go out there and win a national championship. No brainer. I've got Clemson to cover in this game. I've got Clemson to go out there and go undefeated and potentially go to the national championship and play Alabama. However, if you go look at my Final Four prediction, I do have OU there, but Clemson's got a pretty good shot too. Okay, let's go ahead and let's talk about the recruiting campaign for a lot of these teams and just what I am expecting to see coming up into the season. First off, we have heard a lot about David Hicks and potentially him canceling and not going to Texas A&M for a visit. If these rumors are true, this is huge for OU and Alabama, and I think OU has the edge here. We just saw Steve Wilfon today flip his commitment for David Hicks to the University of Oklahoma. He has been fonged. I am excited to see where this recruitment goes throughout the season, especially as Brent Venables gets this defense looking good as a top 25 defense throughout the season. Additionally, I'm ready to see where Keon Kelly goes. Right now, a lot of people are thinking he is going to commit to the University of Alabama. He was originally committed to Notre Dame, but he decommitted. And so I'm excited to see just where Keon Kelly actually ends up landing. Additionally, there is a player that we haven't really talked about a whole lot, and I don't see a lot of people talking about, and that is the number 10th ranked overall player in the country, Nicholas Harbor, out of Washington, D.C., and this is really interesting because right now there is a lot of teams that are really interested in this guy. You would think Maryland has an up because, they're in his home state. He would want to be there. But there's a lot of speculation that he could follow Caleb Williams out to USC, right? I know Caleb Williams was trying to recruit him to OU. It doesn't look like Alabama or OU are going to be in this race. Neither is Clemson, and Clemson usually is able to get a lot of people that they liked, which I don't even think Nicholas Harbor has been reoffered by OU anyways since this staff came to Oklahoma. But I think something interesting here is right now he is being recruited by LSU, Michigan, South Carolina, Georgia, Maryland, Miami, USC, and there has been a crystal ball submitted for South Carolina. Now, this is not a commitment that I know a ton about. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert here. But if he was to go to South Carolina, I am extremely curious at what Shane Beamer is doing out there on the recruiting trail to be able to get a top 10 player in Nicholas Harbor, who realistically anybody in the country would take. Now, we got to talk a little bit about Malvaki Nelson, as there has been a lot of rumors floating around here, potentially saying that he will go to Texas A&M, as I believe that, if I remember correctly, and if I have this wrong, somebody please correct me in the comments below, but there was real belief that he would flip his commitment to Texas A&M after he went to the pool party out at Texas A&M. And he originally was committed to Oklahoma, followed Lincoln Riley out to USC. Now, he is in Los Alamos, California, out there at high school, which is where another big recruit in 2024, TJ Cunningham, is. And a lot of people believe that that is a school that Lincoln Riley has to go and lock down to be able to compete at the highest level in college football. And so for Lincoln Riley to lose Malvaki Nelson in this class, that's going to put him behind the 8 ball tremendously, because a lot of the top quarterbacks in this class, Arch Manning, Dante Moore, Nico, Jackson Arnold, have all been committed to their respective school that they're wanting to go to for a while now. So losing Malvaki Nelson would hurt Lincoln Riley. I think it would potentially put him back. I think it would require maybe Caleb Williams to potentially stay another year as Lincoln Riley tries to get another quarterback in 2024, whether that's Dillon Raiola or somebody else into that quarterback room All right. Another player that we really have to watch for is Samson Okunolola, or I think I said his name right. He's a 5-star offensive tackle out of Brockton, Massachusetts, and this is somebody right now that is crystal ball to go to Miami. And I think it's important to note that Miami is about to blow up on the recruiting trail as if they haven't already. And you might be asking, wait, why is that? Well, they're in major contention for players like Hakeem Williams, who is a 5-star wide receiver out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Samson Okunolola, who is that 5-star offensive tackle. They have other 5-stars like Samuel M. Pemba, who's a 5-star edge rusher out of Bradenton, Florida. They have so many 5-stars that are still looking at them, and they could jump in the recruiting rankings if they continue to land this 5-star talent. Additionally, Alabama is going to continue to have a great year as they go have a great year in football. They still have a couple 5-stars that are looking at it their way. Alabama is going to put up, and I'm going to predict, the best class that we have seen in terms of a composite score ever, beating Texas A&M from last year. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. That's it for week 1. Go ahead and let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. What are you guys most excited to see for in week 1? What are you guys excited for in the college football season? Next week, I'm going to have some guests on. We're going to talk a little bit of Nebraska football, what's going on out there, and then we're going to talk some more OU football, but then we're going to dive into week 2 predictions. So tune in next Wednesday for that. Until then, we're going to see you guys next time.